Welcome to the Live Well, Perform Better podcast. My name is David Duggan and I'm the director of Below the Line, an Irish-based consultancy specialising in helping people, teams and organisations raise their levels of consciousness, inner potential and performance. I am part of a team made up of experts from the worlds of business, elite sport, adventure and health and well-being. We are coaches, mentors and advisors to some of the world's biggest companies and organisations, as well as smaller businesses, entrepreneurs and people looking to make their mark in the world. Our guiding mantra at Below the Line is live well, perform better. What does that mean, you might ask? Good question. Maybe the easiest way to describe it from our perspective is finding the formula that works for you when it comes to things like looking after your physical and mental health, running your business, developing your career, leading your people, or simply being able to show up as brilliantly as possible into your own life, both for yourself and those around you. That's why each week I sit down with a member of our team or an invited guest for a conversation that focuses on the question, what do the words live well, perform better mean to you? This question is a way into exploring with people from a range of different backgrounds, industries and disciplines. What are the practices, techniques, habits or ideas that they use to help them to show up and be at their best in all areas of their lives? Whether that's as CEOs, leaders or managers, or as parents, family members or friends. We keep it short and sweet so that you can extract all the good stuff and get on with the rest of your day and hopefully put some of our knowledge, experience and expertise into play for yourself. This week I'm delighted to be joined by another very special guest, Clodagh Hughes. Clodagh is a coach who brings a combination of hard-won personal and professional experience along with cutting-edge brain and neuroscience to her work supporting leaders in all manner of sectors and industries. Passionate about and definitive in her belief that leadership is the key to organisational success and performance, Clodagh gave me a fascinating insight into what has led her to doing the work she does, including setting up a business as a young working mother, dealing with and experiencing change, and why the COVID-19 pandemic has utterly transformed how we work, and why leaders and businesses need to understand and accept this if they are to support themselves and their people right now and into the future. You can subscribe at www.belowtheline.ie, where you can stay up to date with our podcast as well as our exclusive online events and sessions, including our Press Pause coaching community. Thanks for listening and see you next week. Before we start this week's episode, I'd like to take a minute to let you know about an event we are hosting on the 13th and 14th of October in the beautiful Brooklodge Hotel and Spa in Macredon Village in County Wicklow. The Elemental Leadership Experience will be our first in-person event in over 2 years, and we're really excited to be finally getting back into a room with people and hosting what will be a uniquely inspiring and exciting event. As we all know, the past few years have been a mixed experience for us all. For some, it has been about stress management, coping and survival, both personally and professionally, while for others, it has been a time for recovery, reflection and self-care. Either way, we all know and can see that yet again our world is changing, and with it, so must our mindset, our attitude and our energy, which is why we're offering you the opportunity to recharge your leadership, rediscover your performance edge, and re-inspire yourself to successfully meet the moment and challenge of right now. At the Elemental Leadership Experience, you will be a participant in 2 days of inspiring sessions, workshops and talks, facilitated by the Below the Line team of expert business and performance coaches, all while enjoying wonderful accommodation and hospitality in a beautiful part of the world, with a group of like-minded, success-orientated people. Places are limited, so if this sounds like something you want to be a part of, head over to www.belowtheline.ie for full details on how you can reserve your place. Thanks for listening, and now, on with the show. I'll just kick in with the first question then. So tell me, Clodagh, why do you do what you do?
It's a good question, isn't it? A very good question to ask everyone. And it really made me think about why I do what I do, because I think knowing why you do what you do is really, really important. I suppose, the picture that came to my mind when I reflect on this question was of a little girl at 7, and she was being pulled out of a swimming pool, nearly puking with exhaustion because she had arrived at a race that was meant for 7-year-olds, but the race for 12-year-olds didn't have a member of their team. So the coach just said to my mother, will you throw her in there, and at least we'll have a person there. And I threw myself in and won the race. But I was, exhausted. But I still have that memory of this little girl who actually, despite all the odds, achieved. And that's my philosophy in life. I actually believe that we all have so much within us that is just waiting to be unleashed. And that's why I do what I do. So I am passionate about people. I'm passionate about performance. My logo, I'm not sure if you've ever seen it, but it's the 4 P's in a circle, and it's people, purpose, passion, and performance. And I get up every morning because it gives me such delight working with people and organizations, helping them to really achieve their full potential. And when you're able in some small way to assist in unlocking that potential, which is abundant in all of us, it gives me great pleasure.
And just tell me a little bit more about Motivate, because obviously there was a journey that led you to jumping off and setting this up all those years ago. But can you just tell me a little bit more about maybe what led you to that point, and also what happens in terms of what you do?
So I would have spent again about 20 years in the corporate world. I worked largely in financial services. So I would have been, as my skill is kind of in marketing and strategy, and recognized in a lot of the roles I was leading and putting up when we were trying to bring about change in organizations. And I was always struck by the fact that we would bring in these big consultancies that we paid fortunes for to help us with what we needed to change. But they never really, and I'm sure they've improved a huge amount since, but they never really focused on the how of change. And I was always struck by the fact that we ended up with these lovely documents that to a large extent gathered dust on a shelf, and nothing much materially changed. We kind of got semblances of change. And I recognize that if you actually worked with people around change, that was the golden nugget. Most people don't like change, and they don't like change because something at risk in it for them. And if you work at that level and try and bring people with you and understand what their challenges are around the change and work with them around the change, then great things can happen. So that was fascinating for me in my career. And I kind of got tired of just doing the what. So I decided to understand more about people and change, and what motivated people and what stopped people and what made people resist. So when I had my last baby on maternity leave, I did my first course in executive coaching and I was just hooked. And very shortly after having Sean, I decided to set up my own company around people and change and performance, and I haven't looked back since. So what I do, I work with organizations around change. I'm fascinated by organizations and change, and I think there's a big shift happening in the moment around all of that, which I'd love to talk about in a little. So I work with organizations, I work with leadership teams, because I think leaders cast a very long shadow in organizations. I don't think many of them recognize the shadow that they cast. And I think if you can get leaders really leading, again, great things can happen. And then I work at an individual level as well, and a team level. And one of my passions in life, I've set up a second company called Woman Up. I'm passionate about females having more of a voice at senior leadership tables, not because it's right to do, but because it makes business sense to do. So I also work very specifically with women at the level just before leadership, when they're spinning a whole heap of plates around managing families, trying to get up the career ladder. And at a point where many of them say, this is all too much, they'll become the best version of men they can be in order to get there. So that's the area, an area that I do quite a bit of work in, and I'm very passionate about.
just picking up on what you said, you had your last baby and then you decided to set up a business. What was that like, and how did you propel yourself or keep yourself going through all that process? Because I can only imagine how difficult and challenging that must have been.
It was really tough, but not because I had a baby. It was tough because I knew I wanted to work in a different way, and I knew I wanted to work at something different, but I also loved my job, and I loved the ebb and flow of corporate life, and I loved the fun, I loved the crack, and I loved the giggles at the water machines, and I loved the fact that if my printer broke, I could ring somebody and someone would run up and solve it. And I missed all of that. I missed that, I guess, what would I say, support structure, and that kind of, in all sorts of ways, that comes with being with a group of people. So setting up on your own is very lonely. And you have to kind of bang on doors, and you have to believe in what you're selling or offering. And that could be challenging when you're starting your career, or your business, because you're kind of working it out yourself, So I found it really difficult. And I always say to people, I became an overnight success after about 16 years. And it really did take that long. And so tough, exhilarating, absolutely 100% thrilled I did it. But, would I do it all over again? Yes, but I think, it wasn't easy.
And linking back to what you were saying about change, because this is something, it's a common theme I find with people who are working in this space of coaching. Change it can be it's an intellectual thing, but it's an emotional thing. So I think it's really important people in your space or our space talk about, well, if you want to talk about change, I can tell you about change. I think that's really important. What's your take on that?
Oh, I just could not agree with you any more. I always say the biggest journey for us as individuals is to go from the head to the heart, that intellectualizing piece to the actual feeling piece. And that's why I love your tagline, which is live well, perform better. And as your definition of live well, show up in life as to be your best possible self. You cannot do that unless you've gone through the rigmaroles of change and challenge and difficulty. And you can't be a coach, in my view, unless you have personally experienced the stuff that you're trying to support your clients with. And I know that I am so much better at what I do for having gone through difficult challenges myself and had to step into them and feel the pain of them and deal with them, and found my best self within them, actually. So yes, I think you couldn't, you have to live it to help with it, in my view. And you just get a totally different kind of interaction. You're of service in so many different ways if you really have lived through the stuff and the change, rather than just, as you say, intellectualize it. And there are coaches who do a very good job in a different space around helping clients who may not, have gone through the same life experiences. So that's not to in any way say everyone has to go through stuff. I think certainly for me, I am 10,000 times better in my place, having gone through the stuff my clients have gone through.
And the same applies absolutely with Woman Up. You've been there, so you can absolutely speak from just that lived experience, which is so powerful as well, isn't it?
I remember, sitting in my kitchen, having decided to give up the corporate career because I wanted something new, but also because I felt it fitted better with my whole life. And 3 kids looking up at me, and I'm, not being the best mother, frankly, just going, what have I done here? So, I feel that really, in life, it's about really working out what's right for you. And for some, it's to stay in that world of craziness, and because they thrive in it. Is it not? So, always, life is always interesting.
I know, obviously I've gotten to know you during COVID, and I've seen you bounce onto calls talking about golf or tennis, but I'd love to know what practices, habits, behaviors do you engage in that just help you with this idea of living well to perform better?
Well, let me start by saying I think it's a fab tagline, but by God, it's a hard one to live. I really do believe that. And my own parts, and as you described, showing up life as close to your best self as possible. We're actually not wired to do that. We're wired to really see life as more of a threat, and to be fighting and struggling with life, because I do a lot of work. I'm fascinated by the brain and how that influences performance. And our emotional brain, for all the good things it does for us, it also makes us, manage life in many ways as if it's a threat. So I find in my world, to live and show up as your best self, you're constantly trying to manage that emotional brain, and not to be seen life as a threat, or as every opportunity as a risk, and all those good things. So let me start by saying I think this stuff is hard, so you have to work really hard at it. How do I do it? What practice do I use? I religiously walk every morning. I go up the hill with my two dogs, and I know the mornings I don't do that, I don't feel I set myself up for the day. It's kind of like a reset, just, okay, what's ahead of me? To step into nature, to recognize that things are bigger than us. When you look over Clodagh Hill and you see that sun coming up, we're really only so insignificant in this bigger world, and really, that gives you lots of perspective on the day ahead. I try to meditate, David, but I always struggle with it. And by God, I've tried. So I dip in and out of that. But I guess my meditation is walking, and stuff. I read incessantly. So if you look into my office here, I have about 1,000 million books. I've probably read about, I don't know how many of them. But I think it's really important to keep yourself primed around just, delving into this stuff, and understanding what different people think about how you show up as your best self. And probably the best thing I do actually is I religiously, and have done for the last 15 years, take 8 weeks off in the summer. I purposefully do not work in the summer. And I do that because I think our brains need to rest. And I think the work we do is tough. It's challenging, and it can be exhausting. And I really gift myself 2 months of downtime. I try to do nothing, actually. And that can be hard as well, because I'm a bit of a dynamic, I like being work, I don't like busyness, but it likes me sometimes. And so just really forcing myself to calm the brain, to just do different things, I find is great. I always remember every time I came back off maternity leave, I always felt I brought my best ideas to work. And I think it's the same with this. I find come September, I'm ready to go, and ready to act, and ready to do my good stuff. So I think that's really important, to give yourself downtime to reset your brain and let it replenish.
It's also something which, is a common theme in our conversations, is this idea of permission. It sounds like you've given yourself serious permission to take that time off.
And again, none of this has been easy. The first few years I did it, I'd be like, but now I couldn't. If you asked me to work in the summertime, I couldn't. I just love it so much. And I'm very grateful to have, grateful that I can do that, because I am very conscious that, not everyone can. So I don't want to sound, arrogant here, or, but I think it is, in whatever guise you work, I think it's just so important that you take time out to replenish yourself.
And then my next question around, which you touched on earlier, which you wanted to talk about organizations going through change, but from your perspective, what are the main performance or business challenges that you're seeing in your own world right now being faced by people?
I think COVID has had a huge impact on the way we work. So what I'm seeing is lots of leaders trying to get their people back in to the way it was. really struggling with this concept of flexible working, and just saying, I need everyone in here around me 5 days a week, and whatever. And I see individuals really fighting to hold on to the new way of working and the flexibility they've enjoyed over COVID. So it's almost like there's this clash of, intent and will. And I think if I reflect, I do a lot of work with a guy called Paul Brown, and he's a professor of organisational neuroscience, and he's a fascinating character. So this is not just my thinking, it's also informed by him, but he thinks that COVID has given everyone, and it's back to your tagline of living well, COVID has given everyone an opportunity to experience. And again, I know some people found COVID very challenging. So again, generalizations apart, but lots of individuals, I think, found COVID gave them the opportunity to live well, to have that balance between working and living, less commuter times, the opportunity to work how they wanted to work. It gave them the opportunity to be their best selves while also being productive workers. And I think that organizations going forward have to find the way of allowing people to bring their best selves to work. And I do not believe organizations in the past did that. So, organizations, people now want to say, I'll go back into organizations, but only if it's worth it for me. And in the past, organizations made it worth it by big salaries, or it was money, or the organizational structure was very hierarchical, and incessant working. And I think people are questioning all of that now. So I think the organizations of the future are going to have to step into that question when people say, am I willing to give of myself to this organization? And what does that look like for people? I think that's going to be hugely challenging for organizations to deliver on, as well as deliver on the bottom line, because that's very important. That's what organizations have to do. So I think it's going to be a very tricky time. And I think those that navigate it are going to have amazing success, because you're going to get people who live well and perform well. But those that don't are really going to, I was at a meeting just before I broke up for my summer break, and, with 3 leaders, and they were just not shifting around this flexible working. They just couldn't get their heads around it. And they are going to struggle if they want to grow and sustain their organizations going into the future. I think it's a fascinating time. And I think it'll take a number of years to pan out. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting space.
Just picking up on what you said about those leaders being rigid around what they want, etc. For I want to return to the office. How does somebody like you help somebody to see or to kind of release their attachment to that particular need?
With great difficulty. I'm a great believer that change, there has to be, it either comes from a pure desire to change or a crisis that makes people change. And I think it's difficult for these, much easier to lead in a hierarchical way in some respects. It's much easier to have people around you, because you know what they're doing. And if you've cut your leadership teeth on those practices, not easy to give it up. So I think it's going to be difficult, so I think unless organizations start really seeing that if they don't change what they're going after, which is successful organizations, is in trouble. And that'll take time, David. You won't see that for a while. It's like, the boiled frog syndrome, So I think it's going to be very challenging to work with leaders in that space unless there is a desire for them to be open to that change. But by the way, can I say, I fundamentally believe that when people work in organizations to bring them best selves, by God, productivity is extraordinary. You know, and the essence of the organization, the energy of the organization, the way of being in the organization is just magic. And when that happens, my goodness, nothing is impossible. I think existing organizations take that away from people, you know, and I think, by the way, another controversial point, I think HR, the profession of HR, has a fundamental shift to make around this space. Fundamental. I think HR in its traditional form depletes people's energy as opposed to embraces the energy people can give. And I think there's a fundamental shift need to be changed in how the HR profession works in organizations. I'll probably never get another gig from a HR person, but there you go.
Well, you're speaking your truth, which is the most important thing. And just picking up on what you said there, you know, when you've seen organizations where people are happy and productive and they're living well, is there, I'm sure there's no silver bullet, but is there a couple of ingredients that you see organizations have got kind of right or in the mix?
I know the ones that pretend to have it. So I don't think it's about giving loads of lovely food and having snooker tables in reception and bouncing balls all over the place. You know, I think there's a danger that that's not being authentic about this stuff. I think it comes down, I really think it comes down to leadership. So leaders who are genuinely interested in what fuels the people that they are leading, and the ability to step into each individual's what they bring, what they want to bring, and allowing that to be released. And that's so fundamentally, I think it's about leadership, and really, really stepping into getting the best out of people. And that isn't easy. You know, that's a skill that it certainly isn't easy in our world, where it's all about bottom line performance and short-term, you know, reporting. And so I think our whole system isn't helping this shift, by the way, right? Yeah, so big changes afoot, and that needs to happen in order for that to, and I think that word authentic is really important, that people know when an organization really works to get the best out of them in an authentic way, when they just put on the, as I say, balloons and reception stuff to do it.
Absolutely. And then my last question, what would be your one piece of advice for anyone looking to live well and perform better from your own experience, your own perspective as you see it?
So I often say this to people, and I know it's very direct, but I fundamentally believe, get out of your own way. I think potential is not based on academic smarts, not about professional skills. It's back to that brain of ours that says, you know, the emotional brain, which is all around, which has the amygdala, that's all about protection. It's 10 times more powerful than the piece of the brain that says go for it. And you know, stopping that brain and that voice in your head saying don't, or be careful, or hold back, or you're not good enough, or, you know, what will people think? That's us getting in our own way. And by the way, I have to do this every day. You know, I'm not the full, I have to work on this every second of every day with myself. But I fundamentally believe that if you can get out of your own way, there's so much you can live well and perform better.
And then just for anyone listening, where can people find you? There's the Motivate website and the Woman Up website, I take it.
So I've completely changed my website. I'm no longer Motivate, believe it or not. So it's Clodagh Hughes. I've rebranded to www.clodaghughes.com. So I've apparently people only want people want to work with me, not the brand motivate. And whether that's right or wrong, that's my new brand site. So yeah, that's it to get me.
Fantastic. Well, look, Clodagh, thanks very much for giving me your time. And as I said, we haven't actually ever met in person, but we've only met online. But your energy, your passion, your enthusiasm for what you do, it always comes across on the screen. So thanks very much for giving me your time and for joining us. I appreciate it.
And David, we have to make sure that we do meet in person at some stage. So we'll plan a coffee at some stage of the next while. Yeah. It's a pleasure. Thank you for listening. And thanks for asking lovely questions. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's conversation. We hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you heard and you want to stay in touch with us, then please head over to www.belowtheline.ie to subscribe to our mailing list and to explore our upcoming programmes and events, including our Elemental Leadership Experience coming up on the 13th and 14th of October. Until then, take care and see you next time.